Hey guys, it's Siffa. Sorry my hair's really wet. I just took a shower. So I think that you almost be thinking that I have suffered from like every single freaking psychological disorder by now because I've made videos on like freaking everything. So I wanted to make a video on my OCD. Now I only had this when I was a child. I kind of grew out of it or got my way out of it on my own without any professional help. But so yeah, this is my story about my OCD. It really started when I was about 8 years old. And I remember as a child I was extremely religious. I was very, I felt like I was very in touch with God. And I felt like I had to follow all these rules, all these religious rules very specifically, or I would be punished and like go to hell or be a sinner. And I was very upset about being a sinner and sinning. And so, that's kind of how it all started, is that I would have these obsessions, like, you know how with OCD, thoughts can just pop into your head that are just blasphemous or evil or bad or something you don't want to think about. And I would have blasphemous things like pop into my head. And also I would have, I would say things like, I would think about like lies or make promises to God that were like impossible. And then I would have to like repent for my sins by saying this prayer that I made up. And I made up this prayer, and I would have to repeat it like hundreds of times a day. And I always messed it up because I had to say it with like in like a certain rhythm and like with a certain, you know, with a certain way of saying it. And I would always mess it up, and I would have to say it over and over and over again for hours. And if I ever messed it up, or if I was interrupted during it, I would just start bawling and like get really angry. And yeah, it was, and then it proceeded to hand washing, just like being afraid of germs in general. And it was so bad that any time that anyone touched me, or if I touched a doorknob or a light switch, I would always use a Kleenex, but then I would have to wash my hands anyway. And I would just be in the bathroom washing my hands so much that they became like completely scabbed and covered in blood, and they were just like scaly. Like my hands were like scales, like covered in blood and scabs and just disgusting and pus and stuff. And so I went to school, I was in 4th grade, and everyone like looked at my hands and they were like, "What is wrong with you? Like, you need to see a doctor." And my teachers were worried about me. And they talked to my parents about it, but they decided not to do anything about it, which I kind of am resentful about today, like, because I feel like if I'd gotten help then, I could have like saved a lot of suffering today, you know, like or you know, in my teenage years and young adulthood. I feel like I wouldn't have suffered as much, but you know, who knows? I can't go back on the past and worry about that. But so I basically had to wear gloves like filled with Vaseline like every day to keep my hands like moisturized and to keep them from like the skin falling off and stuff. And then basically I decided that like I had to hide it because like I didn't want anyone noticing. So the obsessions and compulsions became all in my head, so that no one could see it. And there's a term for that, for whenever obsessions and compulsions are all in your head and no one can see it or notice. I forget what it's called, but so I would just count things incessantly. I knew, and I still do that some to this day, just force of habit. But I would count literally everything, every step I took, every bite I took, everything I counted. And whenever I would go to bed, I would obsessively check the doors and the windows, every single window in the house. I would check it over and over and over again to make sure it was locked, make sure all the doors were locked, make sure that all the rabbit cages were locked. And I would just obsessively do this all night long, and then I wouldn't, you know, get to sleep until like late at night. And then in class, I became so obsessed with like perfection and like writing things down correctly. I had this obsession with writing things correctly, and I would constantly be erasing and rewriting so that there were just holes in my paper. And it took me so long to like write things out that I started doing really bad in school. And I was always late for stuff because I was like, I couldn't write things quick enough. And then it got to kind of a climax to where I got this thought in my head that I had to kill my brother. And I didn't want to do it, but I was being forced to by my OCD. And so I had to plan out how I was going to do this. And what I was going to do is I was going to get a butcher knife and go in his room while he was sleeping and slit his throat. And then I was going to go in my parents' room and slit their throats too. And it completely devastated me. Like, I felt like the worst person in the world and just like a murderer and, you know, a criminal. And then I decided that I would rather kill myself than hurt my family. And, because I knew that I couldn't do it, but I was being forced to do it. And then, I really don't remember how I got over that. I just decided that I was going to take charge of my OCD, and I began to use cognitive behavioral techniques on myself, and forcing myself to touch dirty things and not wash my hands, and force myself to mess up, you know, counting and prayers and stuff, and telling myself, like, it's okay, nothing bad is going to happen if I don't do this. Because I thought that, like, if I didn't do all of the rituals and stuff, that something bad was going to happen, or that I was going to go crazy or something. So I eventually worked my way through it, just by telling myself over and over again, like, it's going to be okay, nothing bad is going to happen, everything's okay. But, yeah, that's my story. If you have any questions, comments, let me know. If you have any ideas for future videos or anything more you want to hear about, let me know. Thank you, guys.